Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCullum and I'm here today at Morphy's taking a look at some of the particularly cool shotguns that they have. And that includes this, which is half shotgun and half rifle. This is a Marbles Game Getter. Specifically, it is the first iteration, the fancy version of the Marbles Game Getter. This is a gun that was designed by a guy named Webster L. Marbles. He was fundamentally an outdoorsman. He worked for 30 years as a lumberman, as a trapper, as a surveyor. You kind of get the impression he would do whatever job someone was willing to pay him to go live in the woods and do, because that truly seems to have been his passionate thing in life. And his first real successful commercial invention was something he called the Marbles Safety Axe, which was an axe with a protective cover over the blade so that you wouldn't accidentally cut yourself on it. And that was successful enough, or popular enough, that he was able to build a company, the Marbles Safety Axe Company, to manufacture and sell those axes while he continued to play out in the woods, I think. Because what he ended up also designing was this, a very utilitarian, actually it's not utilitarian, it's a very simple, very lightweight, very handy, and actually kind of surprisingly feature-rich survivalist's gun, sort of. Marbles' philosophy on outdoorsmanship was very much one of minimalism. How little do you need to be able to actually happily live off in the woods? Not take everything that's conceivably necessary or useful, but only the bare minimum. And allegedly at some point earlier in his career, he actually had to fight off a lynx at one point with his axe, which may have helped lead him to the idea that it would be a good idea to have a gun. At any rate, he came up with what he thought was a gun that embodied all of the needs of an outdoorsman. It was a double-barreled weapon, so the top barrel is a rifled .22 rimfire barrel. That's ideal for small game. The bottom barrel was a .44 caliber smoothbore barrel. It was designed for the .44 Game Getter cartridge, which was basically a shot shell, a number 8 birdshot loading of .44 Winchester centerfire, aka 4440. It was a small pistol shot shell cartridge. This was also compatible with the .44 XL shot cartridges used by some other companies at the time. Again, very utilitarian thing. It's a classic combination gun. Rifled bullet shot over smoothbore shot shell. So the shot was something you could use on birds. There was also a single round ball loading of that .44 caliber cartridge available. Still smoothbore, but if you needed something that was a little bigger than a .22 rimfire, you could use that. Has a folding stock on it. And the whole thing weighs in at like 2¼ pounds. It's extremely light and handy. There are modern pistols that weigh more than this full-featured utilitarian rifle. Now, he introduces this in 1908, and they remained in production until 1914 when World War I broke out. They had some in stock at that point. They continued to sell them through the end of World War I. And then, well, there would be other things after World War I, but we'll get to that in a minute. First, well, let's go ahead and take a closer look and let me show you what all of the features are built into this thing, because there really are quite a lot of them. Let's start by taking a look at the markings here. So most obviously on the left side, we have this nice big fun font there, Game Getter. And then on the side of the barrel, we have a series of additional markings. So manufactured by the Marbles Safety Axe Company, Gladstone, Michigan. Successor was the Marble Arms and Manufacturing Company. In 1911, they renamed it because the guns were becoming a bigger element of the company's overall business, and Safety Axe Company isn't what you think of when you want to go buy a gun. Then here on the other side we have patent allowed, interestingly, and calibers .22 and .44. The grips I should mention here are gutta percha, so sort of early rubber, marked with the Marbles trademark marking. By far the most typical configuration of the gun is like this one, .22 rimfire over .44 smoothbore. However, Marbles offered a lot of different sorts of iterations or variations that people could order. So they did also actually offer the upper barrel in .2520, .3220, or .3840. .3840, that's a pretty chunky pistol cartridge. In 1924, they also started offering the smoothbore barrel in .410 shotgun. Again, significantly more potent than the original .44 So when these first came out in 1908 or 1909, the standard barrel length, what they were available in, was 12 inches. However, very quickly in 1910, they added 15 and 18 inch as standard catalog options for barrel lengths. Take a quick look at the stock here. This is sort of a tubular stock with a flat butt plate to it. Back here, there's a latch lever in the front of the pistol grip. Pull that, well, push that up, and it allows you to fold the stock underneath. So it comes to right here. The stock doesn't lock in this position. If you want to open it up, you just pull it open. You'll hear it click right there. So you can actually lock this sort of in position a bit lower if you want more drop to the stock, or you can click it all the way up into position. When you have the spot that you want, you actually screw this little thumb screw down, and that will lock the stock in place. So we can open that up. Like if I want it way down here with a lot of drop, I can take that, screw this locking bar into place, and voila, it's mostly totally stable. So that, like, there's a lot of features built into this gun, even though it seems very simplistic. This, of course, also applies to the sights. You get 2 sets of sights standard on the gun. It's kind of fancy. You have a rear notch sight here. There you go, buckhorn style. That folds down either forward or back when it's not in use, because you also have a target style aperture sight on it. There's that with a little tiny pinhole aperture for viewing through. And if you don't want to use that, you can fold it down, push that into place, and that locks the aperture sight down. So it's low enough you can get your hand in, and then you can use the rear notch sight. Both of those are set up to go with a standard simple bead of a front sight for both barrels. To actually operate the gun, the trigger guard itself acts as the release lever, so it's going to slide here and slide around that rivet like so. Pull that back, and the barrel opens up just about 45 degrees like that. You have a built-in extractor, so you can see that slides out just slightly when I open the barrels up, enough to break the, if the cases are stuck in the chambers, that will break them free. Then you pull them out by hand and reload. There is only one hammer for both barrels, and it's kind of a cool system, sort of like the Lamont revolver in a way. There is an adjustable front element to the hammer. So up is the top barrel, and you can see that hits the top firing pin there. Down is the bottom barrel. There is a half-cock notch in this, by the way. So yeah, there we go. Down's the bottom, and the middle position is the safety position where the hammer doesn't hit either firing pin. So again, a lot of thought went into this, a lot of features in what is mechanically a quite simple gun. There you go. There is a Marbles Game Getter. Total production of the original Game Getter was 9,981 pieces. Then in 1921, he brings the gun back into production, but now it's an improved, modified, simplified, economized second version of the gun. So most distinctively, the tang sight goes away, the grips, the gutta percha grips are replaced by plain flat wood grips. The stock is simplified, the stock folding mechanism is simplified a bit. There are a number of modernized improvements that are made. The flat springs are replaced with coil springs. The hammer is made to be a rebounding hammer, which makes it a safer gun to carry around and to use. And in total, Marbles will make about 10,000 of that second pattern as well. However, one of the big things that hits the Marbles Arms and Manufacturing Company is the National Firearms Act passed in 1934. This places a massive, at the time, $200 tax on the transfer of a number of different types of guns, including rifles with barrels less than 16 inches and shotguns with barrels less than 18 inches. Well, this example has 18-inch barrels. It's actually legal, and in fact, Marbles made a court claim against the NFA, which resulted in the courts declaring that yes, the 18-inch version was legal without any repercussions of the NFA. However, all of the other versions were short-barreled, these would be considered short-barreled rifles or short-barreled shotguns under the NFA, and required a $200 tax and federal registration. And that tax was so much more than the actual cost of the gun that it basically ended sales of the Game Getter. So sales, well, what actually happened, they didn't completely end, but they transitioned to being virtually entirely in Canada, where this sort of legislation didn't exist. We see a similar thing with some of the other short-barreled, well, NFA-regulated guns from the 1930s. Ithaca auto burglars, H&R handy guns, basically transitioned their sales to Canada before shutting them down entirely for lack of commercial demand. The company did survive beyond this. In fact, Marbles still exists as a company. They manufacture primarily sights for guns, which is pretty cool. It's nice that they're still around. I'm sure Webster Marbles would appreciate that fact, but they no longer make the Game Getters. The very last of them were actually assembled in 1962 from leftover parts that I guess someone found in a warehouse somewhere, but 234 of them put together at that point. Those are, of course, second pattern simplified guns. One thing you will also sometimes find are Game Getters without their shoulder stocks on them, because at one time, pre-internet, there was this theory, like FUD lore, that the gun became legal if it didn't have a stock on it. And I can kind of see where that comes from. It seems like, well, it's a pistol then. Except that under the legal definition, it's not a pistol, it would be in any other weapon because of the smoothbore barrel. If both barrels were rifled and it didn't have a stock, then it would be considered a pistol. In reality though, smoothbore barrel, you take the stock off, it's still an NFA registered weapon, it's just a different type of NFA registered weapon. But there were some people out there who didn't recognize that at the time, and so you'll sometimes find these without their stocks, which is kind of a shame because it doesn't actually make them legal. A lot of these were not registered after the NFA was passed because, again, that $200 tax was just so huge compared to the cost of the gun. And of course, there are a lot of people who didn't realize the NFA happened, didn't realize the various guns they already owned were retroactively covered by it. So a lot of the Game Getters out there are contraband today, unfortunately. This one is a particularly interesting and convenient example because since it does have those 18-inch barrels, it's not an NFA item. So it's not an issue at all for this one. I'd like to give a big thanks to Morphe's for giving me access to this one to film for you guys. At some point here, I will get a chance to film a second pattern one. When I do, I'll bring that to you guys as well. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.